The marble floor echoed with every step as Alara moved through the center of the hall. She reached for the crystal decanter, her fingers steady, and poured a translucent liquid into a glass. Beside it, a small, unmarked vial sat waiting. She added 3 drops. The liquid remained perfectly clear. She carried the glass toward the balcony, eyes fixed on the rain-slicked streets of Brussels. This was not a home. It was a conquest. 3 months prior, her uncle had collapsed during dinner. The doctors spoke of heart failure, but Alara had simply watched from the doorway, her hands folded. She did not cry. She stood in the silence, waiting for the lawyer to arrive with a new will. Within a week, the estate was hers. The first piece of the puzzle had been placed. She looked at the glass in her hand, then toward the empty seat at the table. She had learned early that power was not given, it was taken. And she was only just beginning to clear the path. When the second heir complained of a persistent headache, Alara offered a glass of water. She stood still as he drank, her breathing slow and measured. She watched him walk away toward his room, then turned to the window. She adjusted the heavy curtains, tucking the empty vial deep into the fabric folds where no light could reach it. By the following morning, he was gone. No struggle, no signs of violence. A silent room, a final signature, all hers. The detectives arrived. They moved through the mansion in heavy, damp silence, their boots marking the polished floors. They checked the tea sets, pried open medicine cabinets, and questioned the house staff. Alara met them with a slight bow and offered tea, her voice soft and steady as she answered their inquiries. They found nothing. They left with empty hands, believing the story of a natural end. She stood at the front door and watched them drive away into the rain. The mansion remained hers, filled with a silence that felt like a victory. Years drifted by, marked only by the growing mountain of wealth and the deepening silence of the estate. The halls remained vast, but the shadows in the corners seemed to stretch longer. House held its breath. World moved on. Old medical records began to stir. Forensic experts returned to the cold cases, driven by a new, relentless curiosity. They arrived with tools that could read the history etched into the architecture. They knelt on the floorboards, scraping away decades of dust to reach the microscopic gaps beneath. They pulled cores from the soil surrounding the foundation, testing the earth for secrets buried deep. Then, ghostly compounds surfaced, untraceable, seemingly natural deaths. The data was absolute. It did not lie. Poison's signature, a dread report. The investigation that had stalled for decades suddenly accelerated. The noose was no longer metaphorical. It was tightening, drawn shut by the very science Alara had dismissed as forgotten history. The heavy iron gates groaned, a metallic shriek that tore through the silence of the midnight air. Tires crunched over the gravel driveway, stopping abruptly before the main entrance. Alara sat at her desk, a final document spread out before her, the nib of her fountain pen resting on the paper. Oak doors splintered, boots thundered, echoing through the hall like a closing trap. Bright beams of light cut through the gloom, swinging wildly as the detectives fanned out through the rooms. She remained motionless. Shadows danced. Flashlights swept the balcony, his hand gripping the fabric and pulling it aside. The vials clattered to the floor. Gleaming on marble, they sat, decades old, damning in harsh light. The lead detective stopped, his breath hitching as he knelt to retrieve the evidence. Alara finally set her pen down. She looked at the door, her hands resting flat on the mahogany surface. Her long reign of greed had reached its absolute end in the cold, unyielding light of the raid. The courtroom was silent, save for the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock. When the judge finally raised the wooden mallet, the sound resonated like a final heartbeat, sealing the fate of the woman who had turned her own family into a graveyard. The verdict was absolute, stripping away the illusion of power she had meticulously built over decades. The estate, once a place of calculated silence, now stood as a public record of betrayal. But the story did not end with the gavel. The archives are now open to the public, revealing the dark truth that remained buried beneath those marble floors for so long. Every door has a secret. Every mansion hides a past that refuses to stay forgotten. We peel back the layers of history to expose the darkness that time tried to conceal, follow hidden archives to uncover the buried tragedies that history left behind in the dust. Subscribe now to step into the shadows and witness the truth that was never meant to be found. The records are waiting for those with the courage to look.